a very long time. Second Amendment, it was one of the last major provisions in the Bill of Rights to be selectively incorporated to apply to the states. They waited more than 100 years to incorporate it after they had started incorporating other provisions of the Bill of Rights, as those of you who know constitutional law are aware. When they incorporated it with the same kind of majesty that Justice Story talked about, as the right to be armed, as being essential to the ability to defend any of the other rights that you have. Now, Professor Schoenfeld suggests that we live in such a different world than the founders did in the 1700s and in the 1800s, that there's no need to be worried about somebody coming and knocking on your door with armaments, trying to come in without a warrant, worrying about whether or not you happen to have drugs or something else illicit in your house, stolen property. There's no need to worry about that anymore. Well, of course there is. Supreme Court agenda is filled with search and seizure cases. Exactly the sort of case that makes this the equalizer in a household. Not this, actually, because Isabella doesn't work anymore. But makes a gun that you might own an equalizer, not only to an unwanted intruder, but potentially to the state. And I'm serious, absolutely serious, about making that argument. It is an illusion to think that we do not have the state to fear anymore. Professor Schoenfeld steps right into the biggest ditch in this entire debate, and that has to do with how one interprets the Second Amendment, the militia argument. Let me make a number of responses to the militia argument. First, it's not how the apparently mistaken Supreme Court. Next time, I guess we should just ask Professor Schoenfeld what he thinks about the matter before the court. Don't bother to send it to those kind of people, because they don't know enough to be able to make an informed decision. It's not what the Supreme Court said. The Second Amendment says. They said that it's an individual right, not only a right that takes practice out of a collective responsibility. But even if you want to make the collective responsibility argument, the collective responsibility of a militia required every individual, as Thomas Jefferson said in 1824, to be pre-armed. You have to have Isabel at home when they call and mobilize you. The National Guard, which is our modern militia, if we have one, didn't get created until 1917. There's more than 100 years have gone past between the creation of a militia, in which the individual right to bear arms was a prerequisite to the ability to create an actual militia that might be needed. Thirdly, the founders themselves did not understand the Second Amendment as only being operationalized as a collective right. They understood it as something that individuals were responsible for doing. Now let me go to the third set of arguments that Professor Schoenfeld makes in his rebuttal. And that requires us to get serious, I mean really serious, about the data. What does the data show? More guns, fewer gun murders over the course of the last 20 years. That's piece of information number one. Piece of information number two is that Professor Schoenfeld all but admits that Americans are in fact more violent, because we kill lots of people in this country without guns. We kill 3 times as many people in this country as they do in Britain without guns. Piece of information number 3. For Professor Schoenfeld's information, neither plane nor tank, last I checked, was a gun, and would not be covered by the Second Amendment were Donald Brennan wanting to purchase one for his own personal use. Piece of information number 4. In other countries, and you have countries at both ends of the continuum, countries that have massive gun ownership with far lower gun homicide rates than we do, and countries that have far stricter gun ownership with not higher homicide rates than we do, because we're the highest, but high homicide rates. It's not the guns. It's the society that we live in. And it's not as though there's no remedy to this. It's just that taking guns away from people willy-nilly, having somebody come into my home to search for Isabella or Giovanni, who I'm going to show you later, makes me a criminal and creates a criminal class on par with what we've done with the war on drugs in this country and what we did with prohibition, filling up our jails, increasing the strength of the mafia, which would be fine for some members of my family perhaps, creating all kinds of illicitness that we do not need, because gun ownership in this country is a right that you need in order to make any other right that you wish to enjoy enforceable. And the good news is, most of the time, in fact, almost all of the time, you don't have to use a gun. It's the moral threat of its use which operationalizes all the other rights. Thank you.